set. All right, I will call the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission special meeting of May 2nd, 2022 to order. Looking through our agenda, we have no action to take on our minutes. We have nothing on our consent agenda. We do have an option for public comment. That is a regular part of our agenda. Is there anyone from the public that would like to?
Sure.
Yes.
I'm Mary Sylvester. I live at 208 Maple Hill Road. I'm the immediate past president of the Auburn Water District and retired from that board just a little over a year ago. So thanks to the pandemic, I haven't been able to attend these meetings again. I'm really glad that there's a session here for, given how many new commissioners there are, for another review of the legal responsibilities. We did a lot of that work at the Auburn Water District to refresh everybody's minds with who has, beyond opinion, who has what legal responsibilities to do what by charter and interlocal agreements that are binding until changed. Always good for people to have that framework for decision making, especially with a hot set of issues such as we have now. So I look forward to hearing another presentation on this and can refer any current and continuing Auburn Water District trustees to previous packet materials and presentations that we had as trustees, where legal counsel also provided that information for us to guide us. This is a really important time, and I want to summon everyone who is in decision-making mode to their best selves, to remember what we are obliged to do, especially when we have a politicized and highly publicized, and I might even say emotional set of topics to address. I'm particularly happy that Evan is currently the chair. I had the opportunity in some of my previous civic responsibilities for the community in Auburn to be the first chair of one of the hot topics related to the mayor's first task force in agriculture, the Ag Zone, and we came before the planning committee and planning board, and I was especially gratified to see, the professionalism of the board conduct while you had dozens, if not more, people in a high state of agitation across several meetings. That too could apply here, though you're currently fortunate that very few people come to these meetings. The burden of responsibility rests no less lightly on your shoulders. So I commend you all for the important work you need to do at a difficult time. So 3 cheers to Evan. I played a role in asking him to join this board and accept at least being nominated, and even gave him a beer to help him.
That's true. I got to go see the
that's what it takes. That's what it takes. And good government is my goal, and whenever I'm involved in a civic activity. So that's what you're going to get. One more reminder of how to do good government for this commission that has a specific set of responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to say anything during the public comment?
I'm Janet Joseph. I live at 135 North Auburn Road, and I would just like to support what Mary has said. I have been trying to figure out who's responsible for what with regard to protecting the lake, and I will continue to come to these meetings and try to learn as much as I can, but also learn who is responsible and see what kind of decisions are being made. So I support Mary's comments and support all of you in terms of the work that you have cut out for you. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Before I move on, thank you very much Mary, but it only works when you're working with professionals, so I think everyone else is at the same level, but thank you very much. We have no staff report, we have no old business that we're taking up at this meeting. We do have new business under item 6A, introduction of legal counsel. I think at this point, though, before I have legal counsel introduce themselves, might be a good idea for us to introduce ourselves to legal counsel.
Yeah.
And we'll start with Mr. LaChapelle, and I think share our names and from which entity we've been appointed.
Rick LaChapelle, City Councilor, Ward 4, representing the City of Lewiston, Vice Chair of this committee.
And also, I'd love it if you could tell me how long you've been on LAPAC.
This is my second meeting.
You're welcome.
Mary Ann Brentek, I'm the Public Works Director in Lewiston, one of the appointees for Lewiston, and I've been on this committee for a year and a half.
Camille Parrish, I'm a representative for Auburn, through the Auburn Water District trustee nomination. I've been on the LAPAC for, ending my third year right now.
Amy Landry, Executive Director of AVCOG, by position, am on the commission, and I believe it'll be 5 years in July.
So Evan Sear, appointed by the Auburn Water District, and I think it's maybe a year and a half, maybe closing in on 2 years, but
Yeah, that was the year
yep,
you had the beer.
yeah.
That's what it takes, folks.
If I'd known about the beer and alpacas, I would have
Yeah.
made that.
Yeah, sooner.
Well,
Beard.
Yeah.
It's beer, not beer.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's better, yeah.
All right, so,
All right, my name's Alan Holbrook, and I'm a commissioner representing the town of Turner. So I
Okay.
was voted by the Turner City Council to represent Turner.
Auburn Water District, Dan Bilodeau, and it was just a couple months ago, so I've got 3 years ahead of me.
Okay.
And there's one, per the interlocal agreement, there's one water district trustee that can also be commissioner.
I'm Glenn Holmes. I'm representative for Buckfield, Hebron, and Minot. I'm the chairman of the Buckfield Village Corporation, which is a water district in Buckfield, and I've been there for 12 years. And I'm also the chair of the planning board and chair of the budget committee.
Okay, well, you've got a few things on your plate.
Oh, yeah. And I've been here, second meeting.
Okay.
I'm Erica Kidd. I work jointly for Auburn Water District and City of Lewiston Water Division. I'm the Watershed Manager, and I've been in that role almost 4 years.
that's it. Exactly. So I'll turn it over to you, Amanda.
Okay. Yeah,
Just
just,
give yourself a brief introduction.
yeah, absolutely. First, don't take the mask personally. My health history puts me in this position, so it is what it is. It's not that fun. But I just want to give you a quick idea of who the heck I am, so you have maybe reason to trust me and listen to me. So I grew up in Fairfield, Maine, near Waterville. I put myself through Bates on a scholarship, and then I went to Cornell Law School. I've been practicing law for 18 years. I was originally with Bernstein, Scher, Sawyer, and Nelson in Portland, and I just got tired of the big firm situation. So after 7 years, I went ahead and worked at Maine Municipal Association. I was there for 5 years. Awesome group, but it wasn't quite the intensity level that I needed, so now I run my own firm. But my practice has, I mean, I've got some real estate background, some miscellaneous, but primarily I've always been a municipal law attorney. 99.9% of my clients are municipalities, but I've done conservation work and land use work and sort of all these sorts of things. So, oh, and I live in Winthrop now, so that's kind of who I am. So, gives you a small sense of who you're talking to, so, yeah.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 6B under new business. Discussion of LAPEC board responsibilities and authority as described in the interlocal agreement. And we have two sub-items under that. The first of which is to review of LAPEC responsibilities under the interlocal agreement. We will be hearing from council on this. Before we begin, I just want to remind commissioners that this is informative as to our general responsibilities under the interlocal, not specific to any topic or issue that may be discussed later in the meeting. This is so that we can really make sure we're all appraised and on the same page. If you have, obviously later on in the agenda, the letter of demand appears. If while Amanda is talking and going through, if you have questions specific to the letter of demand, I would say write them down so that way we can take those up specifically in that section and sort of leave these sections to just making sure we all understand the process. And I didn't speak with Amanda yet, but I'm thinking we're obviously going to want to be able to ask questions after you finish before we go on to the next item.
Absolutely,
So, okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Before we begin, any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we've got some fairly new members. So for the members who've been around longer, I apologize if I'm telling you what you already know. But, and so, well, I was going to say just for the newer members, but for everyone, any chance you've all waded through your interlocal agreement, really and truly? If you haven't, just wink.
I have.
Okay. So again, I apologize if I'm telling you things you know, but with respect to, well, LawPEC's responsibilities, I guess I'd even back up one step and talk about who you serve, who your duty is to. Another way to talk about it would be sort of a fiduciary duty, right? Who are you here for? Because of course you've all been appointed by your respective entities, but just so it's clear, in this room, and can folks hear me okay? Again, I apologize. In this room, you are here to carry out LawPEC's mission. And again, I've looked at the news coverage, I just drove by a bunch of signs. This is clearly an emotional issue among other things. And I respect that and understand that. But again, your job on LawPEC is to carry out LawPEC's mission, which in short is to protect the lake. And that's just the simplest explanation for it. And so, in looking at, this is AWD, I've waded through a lot of materials in the past couple days. So in your interlocal agreement, the powers that you folks have are set forth on page 11 in section 11. And so you have the authority to hire an attorney and to initiate legal action if necessary to carry out what you're charged with doing, protecting the lake. You have the authority to make contracts, so that, for example, could be commissioning a study. And you have authority to apply for grants and gifts, donations. You have the authority to buy and sell property, lease it, what have you. You have the authority to spend money. 11F, to assist in the enforcement of existing local and state land use laws and ordinances for watershed protection. So that's a biggie. That means you all have the power to take legal action to carry out your mission. And then to adopt rules and regulations necessary to carry out what's in this agreement, including, and I just want to, I'll put this sentence together. So adopt rules and regulations as it deems necessary to carry out the purposes of this agreement, including but not limited to how you conduct meetings, how you make decisions, but also the adoption, amendment, and interpretation of watershed boundaries, and then some other things. And then to adopt and implement watershed protection, management, restoration, projects, plans, and programs, to act on behalf of the parties to this agreement, in implementing ordinances, rules, regulations, programs, policies. Again, to receive money to undertake this mission. K, letter K, to take, prosecute, and resolve legal actions to enforce the provisions of laws and regulations relating to watershed and drinking water protection. So that's significant. You can take legal action. And then the last one is a catch-all, to do other such acts as may be necessary to carry out your authority. So the paragraph following letter L says, by entering into this agreement, AWD delegates to LawPEC concurrent lockstep authority to enforce laws, rules, regulations. So that's put a star next, that's a significant paragraph. So, and we'll talk more about that in the next section, but, so, those are really, just wanna, yeah, I'll save a few other pieces for the next section. That's the long and the short of that first piece. So I could speak. Well, I'll let you ask questions if you'd like, and then I can flesh things out if and as needed.
Yeah, I think at this point, are there questions? General questions. I know that there are going to be questions specific to action later on, but.
Right. So that was the responsibilities piece, and just to point you to the very first paragraph of your intro-local agreement, sort of the last portion of the sentence, last 3 lines, that this agreement was created among all these parties for the purpose of cooperating to assure the protection and control of the watershed of Lake Auburn. So again, what's your responsibility? To protect this water source. Right? So I'll jump into the authority portion of it. With respect to authority, this means I really need to call the eye doctor. I can't get far enough away some days. So this is interesting. I just wanted to. So in one portion of this interlocal agreement, it says that LawPEC can make recommendations to AWD. However, the agreement also says, as I mentioned, LawPEC has, I'll say, the authority to step into AWD's shoes, essentially. So whatever AWD can do pursuant to its private and special law, 1922 statute and its bylaws, which I understand are in flux, but whatever AWD can do, you all can do. And that's a significant source of authority. So you can make recommendations to them, which is, lovely, but not necessarily super effective, potentially. But then again, like I said, you can also just step into their shoes and exercise your authority and their authority. So, and yeah, so the consider recommendations is on page 8, paragraph 7. And then, as I mentioned previously, the concurrent authority is mentioned on page 12, the first paragraph after the alphabetical list. And if, it's interesting, so if LawPEC makes a recommendation to AWD to do X action, and AWD takes X action, and then AWD runs into legal trouble, LawPEC is on the hook for AWD's legal fees. So that's really interesting as well. Yeah,
Okay, that's good.
Sure,
We have
yep.
a visual, yeah.
yeah.
You indemnify us, basically.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
the indemnification piece, yeah. If you make a recommendation to AWD, and they take you up on that recommendation, and then, like I said, they get in trouble, you all indemnify them.
Where do you see that? I'm sorry, just,
Yeah, no
when we're
worries.
reading it, I can go over page.
Yep, absolutely.
It's page 9.
Is it 9? They said refer to my list. Let's see here, provided, yep, so yep, page 9, about the 7th sentence down. Except as this, yeah, so provided that is, and this is that, can't get my fingers to work.
You see where the indemnification.
Right.
It's right here.
So again, it's in paragraph, yeah.
9.
Yep.
Middle of that first section.
Find it. Provided that AWD is indemnified by the commission from and against all expenses connected therewith, connected with whatever recommendation you might have made, whenever acting in accordance with requested law. So,
I think it would be important to note that the 1991 bylaws for the protection of Lake Albany came before the creation of the commission as well.
Bylaws for the AWD.
Which is what is in flux, as she mentioned. We're updating that, and we've been doing it for the last 3 years. Mary started that process about 3 years ago. So I think it'd be important for the commissioners to get a copy of the present one, and I can also email you the current drafts that we've been presenting at meetings for public comment. That is listed to do list.
is that feel sufficient?
Um,
I can go into more detail.
I think, I get the sense that it is sufficient enough for commissioners to be able to craft their questions, and that we are likely to have a deeper dive as
Yes, we are.
specific questions arise. Having said that, before we move on, are there any questions about this, what's been presented up to this point?
I'm still a little confused about stepping into their shoes to exercise authority like we were the Auburn Water District.
Well, yeah,
I mean, I
so,
know it says it, but what does that really mean?
well, we might have to,
Look at a specific topic.
yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the answer.
I'm so sorry, I apologize. So the question was, what does it really mean to step into
Yeah,
AWD shoes?
exactly.
And my response was, we may need to flesh that out in our executive session with a specific, but,
Is there a way to do that in general?
yes, that's exactly what I was just about to, absolutely. So again, by entering into this agreement, the AWD does hereby delegate to LawPEC concurrent authority to enforce any provision of state or local law, regulation, bylaw, or ordinance relating to the watershed and the purity of the waters of Lake Albany.
Got it.
That's paragraph 12. So, in a sense, what you, and I've got,
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Definitely.
Because I think I might understand what
Okay.
some of the confusion is.
That's
So,
okay.
as written, it says to enforce, and we are very used to the idea that we are the enforcement arm, but that we are not the policy creation arm. In reading this, it says concurrent authority to enforce any provision of state or local law. Is my assumption that those would include the state laws and local laws that provide authority to AWD as a policymaking board? Because that is written here, we would be enforcing those provisions by adopting rule or ordinance or whatever it is that we want to do. Does that make more sense? No?
So
Okay.
let's say,
I know.
That's the way I'm seeing that. It's like, whoever crafted this sentence probably didn't think about the breadth of what's there.
yeah, it's like with any ordinance, until, you can draft it as carefully as possible, but the rubber hits the road when certain circumstances come up, and then you realize ordinances are imperfect. But, yes, go ahead.
So, when it says requests, anything we or recommend to them,
Yep,
that would be an official, voted upon recommendation specifically to do X.
correct.
Having conversations with, saying, hey, have you thought about this, have you thought about that, wouldn't necessarily kick in that clause. So basically, the only time this would be in effect is if we didn't like what they were doing, and then we recommended something for them to do that they didn't think was probably appropriate.
Correct,
Okay.
right?
I'm-
Yes, does that make sense?
Yes, that's the enforcement in piece, for sure,
Well, so,
in general as well.
yeah, and so again, if AWD, if LawPEC wanted AWD to take a particular action and AWD was disinclined to do so, then you could take that action. And so, as I went through all these documents for you, to come up to speed, of course, once I saw that concurrent authority piece, I looked at the AWD private and special law with fresh eyes, and just to say, okay, well, what can AWD do? Because whatever, so, the long and the short of AWD is to, again, protect the water. But I don't know if you have the AWD private and special law from 1923, but it's on page 3, section 6, sets forth AWD's powers. She'll have the power to adopt bylaws that, of course, aren't inconsistent with state law, to prevent pollution, to preserve the purity of the water, and they may prescribe penalties for the violation thereof. And it talks about going to court. Power and authority, again, it's kind of older language, but essentially you can go to local court, or you can even go to Maine's Supreme Court, or AWD can. So then you can, stop an action if you felt it needed to be stopped, ask for an injunction, that type of thing.
I'm sorry, what year was that?
This is 1923. This is, the private special law, the special statute that created the water, AWD, the Auburn Water District.
Chapter 60.
Yeah, so that section there was the primary provision that is relevant for our purposes with respect to AWD's powers. And then I'm now holding AWD's bylaws, and what I have is the original that was redlined, so I could see both the bylaws as currently written and then as proposed to be.
Do you have the blue lines as well?
Well,
That's the latest draft. Sorry.
Sid gave us what he said was the latest draft.
Okay. Do you have a,
yeah, sure.
It doesn't matter,
Yeah, no,
at this
yeah.
point, you can use that one,
Well,
the blue lines were basically more substantive,
oh, okay, I don't,
substantive.
I only recall red lines, but I could be mistaken, of course. Yeah, I think he provided those maybe the middle or late last week.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be fine. I think what's happening is Councilor Pross is,
Fleshing.
well, he's got a few more changes,
Oh,
so,
okay.
but they're nothing, mostly technical, so they won't affect this discussion.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, so yeah, I jumped into AWD's bylaws to, of course, see what they say. And again, it says that, well, it reiterates that AWD has the power to adopt bylaws, again, to protect the lake, and that these bylaws will have the same force and effect as municipal ordinances. So that's significant. And again, the authority to bring legal proceedings. And then, yeah, and I tabbed something, but it wasn't something you've already heard me say. Yeah, so, again, that's the long and the short of it, more the short of it than the long, but questions? Yeah.
So confusing in regards to the dual
Yeah,
boards,
yeah,
in that LawPac has the same authority as AWD.
yeah.
So you just sat saying they have the ability to make ordinances, and so does LawPac have the ability to make ordinances?
Oh, yeah.
In Auburn,
Well, so it's,
or Turner, or Buckfield?
well, to say this is, a real mess would be an understatement. And I wanna put my eyes,
But isn't it defined in regard to the protection of the lake
Well-
and the watershed?
well, that's.
Correct, but I'm only addressing, correct.
I mean,
We can't talk about a development,
Well,
And Buckfield, come build, come on.
yeah, but if the watershed, if it's water from city A is dumped into city B, LawPac has the ability,
Yeah, it would essentially be creating, well, that which already exists in Auburn, which of course is this overlay zone. And I understand from Evan that AWD has never really gone that far, so to speak, right? They've got these bylaws, but they've never adopted an ordinance, something more global and to sort of, and I think it's because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's because to date, more or less, until this issue arose, Auburn's overlay was sufficient. And so AWD didn't feel the need, and I'm just guessing, really, I don't know, to adopt an additional overlay ordinance.
So, specific, if I can
Yeah,
talk about
please.
specifically, in the 70s, they came up with the initial ordinances.
Yeah,
So we'll call those ordinances instead of bylaws.
sure.
And then, when the city of Auburn decided to adopt them in their entirety,
Mhm.
there was a record of minutes that said that that was sufficient for the Auburn Water District, and they had accepted the fact that they had adopted them.
Got it.
So they never created that exact ordinance for themselves, but
Right.
we have the power and the ability to do that.
Correct, yep,
This is, the discussion goes into when the city continues, the city of Auburn continues their ordinance discussions for the protection of Lake Auburn, like all these nice things that they want to do, low impact development. We actually want to ask our neighboring upper watershed towns to adopt those as well. So we'll have the power to create an ordinance, or they can just voluntarily accept the ordinances that the city of Auburn has been doing, hopefully.
is that,
okay? So now my question, let's say Turner or Buckfield does not do anything like that. does LawPac have the ability to enforce some kind of rules,
Yes.
ordinances in Turner, Buckfield, Auburn, wherever? Does LawPac have that authority?
Yes.
Within the watershed area, correct?
Within the
Exactly.
watershed.
And
Exactly.
within the watershed, you can.
That's right,
But,
exactly.
so, my experience with this is Buckfield and Sumner, because we have North Pond.
Mhm.
So we drafted what we thought needed to be done for North Pond, went to Sumner, and fortunately, we all get along up there, and they adopted those rules.
Mhm.
So, but if they hadn't, we had the power to force that on them within the watershed.
Correct. Yeah,
We haven't felt the need to do that
right,
to this point.
right, yep,
This board has that authority.
yes, absolutely,
As
absolutely.
does AWD.
Right,
Correct.
that's exactly right.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, to me, this is one of the most concerning things I've been
As
hearing
does
throughout
the
this
city of
process, is that there are now 3 entities, as we understand them, that have concurrent authority, and it's one way to make a really big mess.
Absolutely.
What is the third besides?
City of Auburn.
Oh,
City
City
of
of
Auburn,
Auburn,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. So, it is.
Well, I guess in this board is that, you know, we would come together with all those 3 groups as this representation is here. If there's an ordinance that we feel needs to be more protective, that we're developing it together.
Right.
In theory, that's why this.
Ideally, it's supposed to be a cooperative.
Yeah.
Cooperative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in foresight, they did put it in so we could act independently to make sure the water.
Right, I mean, just imagine in a worst-case scenario where, and I'm not saying this is what's happened whatsoever, I just sometimes, if I take an example to the extreme to make a point, imagine that AWD went totally rogue and decided, you know, do whatever you want on the lake, we're gonna build a fun festival park, whatever. You know, say AWD lost its mind for whatever reason, then LawPac would jump in and say, hold on now. Yeah, so just, again, just an extreme example, but, yeah.
And I think one thing that's important for people to recognize too, around the table, there are lots of people that deal with ordinances, and then there's lots of people that don't necessarily deal with
Okay.
ordinances.
Okay,
That it's important to understand sort of the hierarchy of what gets applied. And so the way this works is it would end up being the stricter. There's always the stricter ordinance or law that is applied in a case in which there's 2 conflicting rules. So that's important for everyone to know.
yeah, thank you. How many folks don't deal with ordinances on any kind of a regular basis? Yeah, okay, okay, all right, I apologize for, yeah. Yeah.
I was just thinking, I saw the presentation when I first started, I think it was my very first meeting, when we had an attorney kind of describe what our authorities and rules were. And I never got out of it that we could create our own ordinances. I never got that out of it, so maybe the second time around it really clicks. I don't know.
Well, and that
You
was,
know.
must have been Jim, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have, maybe,
I think Jim didn't focus on
That's
the
the-
concurrence so much
that's what I'm thinking.
as the following sentence. The Auburn Water District pledges covenant and agrees, however, to consider recommendations. And he read the following line, and also to exercise its regulatory authority. And thereby be indemnified whenever acting in accordance with the request of the commission. So I think Jim had read that to say, they agreed to hear a recommendation, but because of, it's like everything, it was Jim's opinion that the way that that sentence was crafted, that yes, they agreed to consider recommendations for the commission, and also to exercise its regulatory authority, as long as whatever we're asking them to do fell within the remainder of that paragraph.
Yeah, and I have every confidence in Jim. He and I
Yeah.
have known each other for, I don't even know. So he's,
So I think that's specifically returned, because he did kind of harp on that one.
Mhm.
okay, so yeah, It doesn't sound like he missed something, he just
No.
was focused elsewhere.
Right.
Correct.
So remember, meeting number 2.
Yeah, no worries.
Someone said earlier that we were the enforcement arm, basically, for AWD.
Traditionally, that's how we've it's been viewed.
Have we been used, or how we do it ourselves, or, I mean, it's like, they have the same power to prosecute as we do. Why would we do it instead of them?
Only if you had to.
Right,
Yeah.
if we don't
So-
think that they have, then we have the authority to tell them, we want you to.
Or to do it if they won't.
Right.
But
Or to do it
historically,
if they won't.
but historically, there's been none of that going on, I take it? There's really no enforcement to be had over the last decade.
Oh, that's
Oh,
not true.
enforcement,
I'm asking.
no.
Yeah.
So, Glenn, with regard to enforcement, we're talking about, so if you, for instance, take a walk down the Whitman Spring Road, okay? Those lands are not owned by AWD. Those are LAPEC lands, and LAPEC sets its rules and it enforces those rules with regard to the watershed. So, if you are fined,
So those aren't the same rules?
they enforce POLA, the protection of, so we enforce where the bylaws for the protection of Lake Auburn,
Which are our rules.
which are
Not theirs.
AWD's
So
rules.
why wouldn't they enforce
Because they've entered into an interlocal cooperative agreement
Yeah, that's right.
with multiple towns. I think if I had to guess why,
31 years old might have something to do with it.
I would say, well, I would say it's because, given the number of actors, you wouldn't want any one of those entities to act unilaterally.
Right.
So how do you get around that?
That's-
You put a bunch of us on a board together where, we're gonna disagree and have no choice but to come to an agreement, and that's
Right.
how
So
you,
that
that's how
no
you get
one
done.
can take a unilateral action without the approval of
Yeah.
anyone else.
So when I say enforcement, listen,
just curious.
I'm not saying that as like an authority, I'm saying anecdotally, having been just the short period of time I've been on, the way it has always been described is that AWD makes the rules and LAPEC is really in charge of enforcing and digging deeper and fleshing them out and,
Cool.
yeah.
Thank you.
But it sounds like clearly there's more there.
So enforcing is a little stronger than like watchdog.
Yeah.
I want a badge now, that's all it's doing.
Right.
So I'm gonna walking down there, hey, you can't do that.
You can't do that.
Other
I should have let
questions?
the water once, but.
Other questions?
One question I've been thinking a lot about is just how to keep up with the timeline of events that are occurring within the city of Auburn, which is gonna help dictate our responses and decisions,
It's coming up.
okay.
We're gonna talk about that.
Okay, okay, maybe I'm jumping the gun there. I've been thinking a lot about that, that we don't, meet that often and stuff, and then there's already plans in the works, are we gonna be behind the 8 ball when things are going into effect, and then we haven't, taken our stance or made, legal decisions around those steps, that's something I've kind of thought a lot about, how that's gonna play out, and
Yeah.
I think that'll be a big,
how we
big
stay
part
ahead
of
of the
that.
curve, so to speak, so that we're not behind what's already occurring, which, once things occur, damage can be done, and I know it's not an easy question to answer, it's gonna take a lot of thought, I understand.
Right,
Yeah.
and really to some degree it is what it is, you're right. Different entities are moving at different speeds and whatever this group may want to do, the best we can do is have me move as quickly as possible.
From a legal standpoint, yes.
Yeah.
Because you're either asking for it to be amended or for it to be revoked, depending on where you are in the time schedule. Like if we were
Essentially.
past.
Right,
If
right,
we were
right.
past a deadline that was already voted in or whatever.
Right, right.
Even if the city of Auburn was to do whatever they wanted to do, and if AWD did it, we could vote 3 months from now at the stricter rules, and those are the ones that apply.
Right, the argument would, well,
Yeah, it
Yes.
says,
So we're only going
yeah,
forward.
to adopt such rules and regulations for the city of Auburn.
So it's not so much about arguing with them what they're doing, it's deciding if we agree or disagree, and then doing what we think is right.
Yeah, it's really about deciding what we think is best and moving forward with that, if those rules don't exist. a learning experience for everyone that, those entities that had authority to enact rules probably ought to have enacted rules for themselves regardless of whether anyone else did. But, yeah. Are there any other questions? I have a question to put forth to the board. Do people have questions specific to the letter of demand? And are there commissioners that wish to talk about options with regard to the letter of demand now that we've heard from council?
Yes.
Okay. The answer is yes. One MSRA 5046E allows us to enter into executive session to consult with our attorney concerning legal rights, responsibilities, and duties. If having that discussion in an open meeting format would put us at a disadvantage or require us to discuss things, I guess put us at a disadvantage for the best way to describe it. So, we are not required to, but yes, at this time I will seek a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MSRA 5046E. There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a second? Discussion? Not being. All those in favor by show of hands. The board has voted unanimously to enter into executive session. At this time, does anyone from the board need to take like a 5-minute break or something before we discuss?
Okay.
All right, we are now out of executive session, discussing possible additional LAPIC action regarding the letter of demand dated March 31st, 2022. We've been apprised of our authorities and rights and responsibilities by council. At this point, members of the board are going to need to decide what action, if any, they believe we should take tonight with regard to the letter of demand. So is there any discussion or feelings about this?
Are you looking for a motion to be discussed, or are you looking for a discussion?
Well, that's a good question. I guess we probably need a motion to discuss.
Yeah.
So, does anyone have a motion?
I would make a motion to respond to the letter informing them that we will be peer reviewing all available data to understand if we need an additional study at this time.
It's a motion seeking peer review. Worded correctly? I asked you because I know you do research.
I was just gonna say, to specify specifically what the study would encompass in your motion. Were you talking about the whole watershed? Or
No, I'm talking, as far as right now, we're gonna review all available data
regarding the
regarding
Grace
the
Lawn property?
Grace Lawn property, watershed, whatever we get our hands on to look at.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to be as specific as possible. And
Okay, so the motion, as I understand, has been made and seconded, and correct me if I'm wrong, the motion is to engage experts in a peer review of the available data within the watershed, to include the most recent study by Auburn, as well as additional studies pertinent to the watershed and the parcel on Grace Lawn that was just recently rezoned. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, this was seconded. Discussion.
Seems like we've discussed a lot of it already, but we should say more, right?
Well,
Why
I
is it
think,
okay? Why is it a good idea? Why is it a bad idea? Somebody fight with me.
right, I know,
So the point with the, in terms of the rezoning of Grace Lawn Road, we've determined that in order to have adequate data, or to confirm, or disconfirm, that's not a word, but this study, we would have additional data we believe will help us to make that decision.
Yeah.
And without that,
I think we need to find that, we need to have findings that that allow us to say we believe
One way or the other.
one way or the other, whether or not it was appropriate to take it out of the watershed
Right,
before we
I
can
think-
take action with regard to it being taken out of the watershed.
I think once we have that information, I think, I'm not sure you need to add it to it, but I think we ask those experts to create a set of findings of facts for us based on what they see as to what the facts say. Because unless that, I'm always calling ABCOG to make my findings of fact at Buckfield, so.
And we're doing all this because it's our core responsibility to protect Lake Auburn, and we're doing the due diligence, the extra step to confirm their findings, because we're putting all our trust in their data.
Absolutely.
Right, so it's incumbent upon us to say, okay, this is what you've given us. We're having this peer review.
Right. We just want to make sure that you're right.
It is not responsible of us as an entity to simply take one's word.
And I think we determined from hearing from Camille that there is other data out there that could be reviewed.
Yeah,
And so
there's a few studies that have to do with the landfill and, you know, so it's not as comprehensive, but there are some additional maps and.
Would you be willing to,
Get your hands on
okay,
those.
so,
I'll try
Well,
and
that's
get
why I'm
So-
bringing it up,
so
that
I
there are
guess-
specific things we know or that Camille knows about.
that I
right,
found.
so I guess Camille, like, when it comes to policy procedure, I have no problem putting things together.
Yeah,
We have no clerks to direct this. Would you feel comfortable being asked by the commission to coordinate that along with LawPEC staff and,
sure, I can work with Erica on that,
okay.
And
If
Erica.
if you feel comfortable doing that,
yeah.
does anyone feel that we need to do that by motion or that,
No.
okay?
No, I
All right,
have
then I think
Thank you.
we'll just leave that,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
piece up.
and we'll distribute the information to everyone once we
All
get
right.
that together.
Is there other discussion?
What's our time frame for like
Yes.
this next step? So obviously the clock is ticking, Auburn's moving forward, the plans, they.
I don't engage in peer review. I think it's going to depend on
Right.
as they can do it, right?
I mean, we have some questions, we have another meeting prior to the June 8th meeting. At this point, we said the June 8th meeting, I mean, what, September 14th or something like that. So I mean, there's a lot happening that we have to kind of be in tune with to make sure that we're responding, you know.
I would say 2 weeks, I would say 2 weeks to gather the data
Yeah.
on the outside.
I think from what I was able to find, I mean, I didn't do an extensive, you know, but I should be able to, within 2 weeks, get back to what I saw and get that out to Erica and you.
Right, and I think
Okay,
the request
and
of the
how
city of
long before
Auburn.
those experts are able to peer review? Like, who do we send this to peer review?
Right.
Well, that's,
Scott.
So do you have a recommendation, I guess, is the question?
Scott Williams?
Maybe
Yeah.
Evan's asking, do you have a recommendation of
He's
who we
retired?
can have
No.
review the data that you know is up?
How about Scott Williams? Do you know Scott?
no,
He does our lake water stuff in the Buckfield Village Corporation.
yeah, that,
He was formerly lead of Lake Stewart's Maine.
Yeah, I mean,
Is this something he could do?
oh.
Certainly ask him.
Yeah.
He would know who could do it if he could do it.
I'm happy to reach out to
did
him.
you say Scott Williams?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed your last name. Oh, yeah, I know.
You
I
know
know
Scott,
Scott.
yeah.
Is this something he could do, you think, to review everything and give us a?
Yeah, I don't know if he does groundwater work at all, but he could do the surface waters, you know.
He could review it at least.
So I think
Yeah.
one of the issues is the groundwater, so if it's not him, is there other, or do we want two reviewers,
So
like how
he's
does
an
this?
aquatic biologist, so he might know someone that is in that field.
And
So maybe then it's you
Yeah,
speak
naturals.
with him and
Yeah,
then
if he wants to
determine.
talk to Scott, and- yeah, he definitely wants to protect the lake.
listen, I'll tell you, like, I like policy and procedure, but I think we're on a timeline such that
Get it done.
I think, like, we just gotta give Camille direction, like Camille, we want like 1 or 2 independent
Right,
individuals that you feel
that are
comfortable,
experts in this.
that you believe are experts that can peer review this and,
Give us a summary report.
you know, and because otherwise, we're gonna have to keep coming back and,
Right.
and
No, I agree.
I feel like Camille out of all of us probably has a better understanding of what's going on with regard to the science.
Yeah, it's just a matter of whether I can find those experts that are available in the timeframe.
Right.
Well, that's the question, what is the timeframe?
So why don't we
think-
come back in 2 weeks and see where we're at? But if you can have it all done by then, great, if not, you let us
I
know.
got it.
Well, I know, I get that, but you'll have the
Why don't
data,
we wait
you'll
for
have
a
talked to him.
report, just,
Yeah, I'm loath to.
I don't
have
need a
meeting- have
report of the
meeting.
study, but
Yeah.
Oh.
have Camille report back to us
Yeah.
in whatever, however long it takes you to see. If you can find a couple people, let us know, yes, I found these 2 people, but it will take an additional 2 weeks for them to do this review. So as soon as you've been able to reach out to a few, give us a sense of the timing, is that?
Yeah, I would say I would like to go as fast as that process can go.
Okay.
And not familiar with that process, so I'm reluctant to try to put a timeline on it. All right. Other
And while we're
discussion?
working on that, are we making a recommendation to Auburn to give us that time and not take further actions, or are we avoiding that?
I think that would be a discussion for either a subsequent motion or an amendment to this one, but yes.
Well, my understanding, to address Dan, my understanding, Auburn's just doing a first reading, and they're gonna do the second reading in a month.
Not for the rezoning.
It's
That's
already
not-
been done.
The rezoning's
Well,
already
it's
done.
already done.
The septic,
That's for the
first
septic
reading is
design.
tonight.
The septic.
The
The
septic
septic
first.
design.
We haven't
But
discussed.
the watershed has already been done.
By both the council and the AWD Board of Trustees.
The only way to stop that now would be an injunction.
But we need the information, I think, to be able to say, we
We
can't
need
have an
a
injunction to
So
say
we
need
still
an
have
injunction,
we
so
still
that
have
we
the
get the
first
information to
motion
see
on the
if we need an
table,
injunction.
right?
Yes.
Has been
I
voted on.
Has
agree.
that been seconded?
It has been seconded for discussion.
So I think we can take a vote, and I'll
Yes,
be
I agree.
making a subsequent motion,
Okay,
separate motion.
absolutely, absolutely. I think you're right, we're starting to diverge. All right, any more discussion on the motion at hand? Anybody need clarification on the motion?
Peer study.
All right,
And I guess for clarification, who would do the hiring if Camille finds somebody? Are we granting hiring authority, or is that coming back to chair, vice chair, or are we waiting for a full meeting for hiring authority?
Do we need to hire them?
You need to contract with them. Somebody has to sign a contract.
Couldn't, like, Erica do that because you do
Well-
contracts for other things, right?
Yep.
That we approve,
and listen, like,
if we need to
at some
hire?
point, I know you've been given authority to just sort of like conduct information studies for
Right.
Lake,
Just
right?
handle
So
it, yeah.
Right.
it already falls under her authority. I
Yeah,
think.
I
Okay.
think so.
Yeah, good.
All right,
Can
All of it.
Erica contribute to that peer review? Or no?
why not? I think,
Well, exactly,
Okay.
yeah. I'll-
They'll work it out.
look, I trust Camille, she's gonna figure it out.
All
All
right,
right,
yeah,
all those in
that's
favor?
Thank you, Evan.
That's right.
Opposition, abstention, none, okay,
Is that unanimous?
that is unanimous.
Of those present.
Are there any other motions?
And I move that we recommend to City of Auburn that there be no new development in the watershed or as to parcels recently in the watershed. And no new development pursuant to changes made to zoning and ordinances within the past 6 months.
Can I ask for clarification? Are you essentially, so I just want clarification to make sure I understand. You are asking us, well, first of all, I mean, do we want to recommend to City of Auburn or AWD? That's a little bit, but I guess that's part of the,
Both.
that's part of the, that we are recommending to the City of Auburn that there be no new development beyond what would have been allowed to 60 days ago
Yes.
within the watershed. And
As it was.
additionally, what?
As it was 60 days.
As it was 60 days ago. And additionally that we are asking them to postpone any development on parcels recently taken out of the watershed.
Yes, I accept that friendly amendment, and
Well,
I
I'm just on
No, no,
just
no.
a clarification.
Well, I'm gonna adopt it as a friendly amendment then. And further include Auburn Water District in that motion. To same effect on all.
That we recommend
All
or we
request,
request
yeah.
that.
Second.
How is that being done?
To be,
The lawyer's gonna write a letter.
Okay, so that's, yeah, how are we communicating this information?
evidently, I'm writing a letter.
Yeah. Yes.
Discussion?
Yeah.
So I won't vote in favor of this just because, and I spoke earlier, but I wanted the public to know that, that the sand pits have been studied to death, that 40 to 60% of the stormwater issues with the sand pits are going to be mitigated with residential development in that area, whatever you're going to do. Is it commercial or residential? I don't know. Does anyone know?
Commercial.
It's
You
residential.
don't know?
Commercial.
There's ground monitoring wells that have
Not
tested the groundwater, and it's moving away from the lake. And topographically, and if you go into that sand pit, the water that is, I can't see going anywhere but draining into the groundwater, but that groundwater is moving away. And these are all going to be mitigated by those developments, and there's also a direct cost to the City of Auburn taxpayers for something that we think is required because we're going to lose our waiver of filtration. So that's a ratepayer versus a taxpayer issue, and that's pretty much why I can't support that.
I have a legal question, I guess. The city of Auburn would be in jeopardy if they were to not issue a permit on an ordinance that's already been approved, correct?
That's right, they really, as I had mentioned earlier, they really don't have,
They can't stop themselves.
they can't stop themselves. No.
My thinking is that, they can decide how they want to respond to a recommendation. And my biggest thinking in making this motion is, what's the rush? And we feel we don't have the information that we need to decide how best to protect the lake, whether that's agreeing with Auburn's actions or Auburn Water District actions or not. And our recommendation is a way of obtaining time to abide by our duties.
Are you a criminal law attorney? What do you do?
You got it.
Okay.
I would be scared shitless, man.
No, just because you mentioned you don't do a lot of civil stuff,
Yeah.
so, I mean, therefore. And so I've been doing this for 18 years,
Right.
just this, more or less. And so just again, your point is well taken, but again, they can't.
They'd have to enact a moratorium on themselves.
Well, but I think as a commission, if we believe that we still have question about it, that we are just taking this action to demonstrate something.
You
and
mean,
that-
with respect to asking them to put the brakes on?
To me, we can always choose not to pursue any legal action as to this other parcel. I'd simply like some more time to consider that, and if they feel that they can work with the Gendron family and so on in agreeing to that recommendation, great. If they feel it's their duty to proceed straight away, well, fine.
Right.
So be it.
I mean, we can't determine what they're gonna do, we can just say,
Please stop.
this is what we would like, I mean, right, we know what that may mean, nothing, but I think as a commission, if that's what we feel we would ultimately want, then we should request it.
And maybe we take legal action in that regard in future. Maybe we'd say, well, that's an argument we give up. So,
Well, I'm not threatening legal action.
No,
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 no.
it was-
So-
We're not, we're.
Okay.
For my part, I will say, I have a hard time wrapping my head around procedurally asking someone to do something that we know they cannot do.
I ask people for money
Well,
all the
he's
time.
asking for
And they
time.
can't, and I know they can't give it to me.
No, that's fine.
Right, but he's asking
it-
for time.
In
They can't do
conjunction,
that? Why can't they do that?
They have to put a moratorium on themselves.
Right, but he was suggesting just.
They can't.
If somebody walks in for the building permit, they have to issue it because if
It's
they.
Right.
Yeah, right.
But they could still talk with them and say, would you mind putting it off for this reason? With this esteemed body.
and if the developer says no, then.
Well, then they go forward.
Right.
So I have
We're not giving them legal advice.
I have a question, right, no, I have a question about that, but then it, I guess I'm talking myself to the second one. I was gonna say, like, I have a hard time saying, I want time to make sure that that's not gonna be harmful. The issue being, they have something they can put in front of me that says it's not harmful. So upon what
Yep.
grounds am I saying? I'm saying like, well, I disagree with this.
Boy, wouldn't
Or they
that have
might,
been great if
until
they
you get
shared
more
that with
information.
us?
What?
Boy, wouldn't that have been great if they shared that with us?
Yeah.
But when did it, I mean,
Even the new information.
this was a public,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that's been shared
that's-
with
that's-
everyone.
Yeah,
Right, but
it's
they
gonna be
never
public.
came to us personally, so.
Oh, about-
Commission.
about the rezoning, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, we didn't take action on that.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues I think we faced is that we're collecting information from other municipal activities and newspaper and so on, and community, and we're not, we haven't done a great job of ensuring that we are putting a lot of information into our own record.
I agree. And I don't know, I think I heard Amy just say, but, like, I guess the other piece too is, this came before us from one of the clerks. Like, a clerk sat in a meeting and said, hey, Auburn's gonna be doing this, how do y'all feel about it? And we were like,
How long ago was that?
December.
yeah.
Well, I seem to
maybe in
recall,
December. And at the time, the commission said, we don't really see a need to act on this, right? So like, I guess I just, like,
Maybe January.
it gives me pause to add in.
I seem to
I
recall,
certainly
yeah.
can get behind the,
Not
ask
like-
them to limit any new development beyond the scope of what had been allowable, you know, at some point in the past. But given the whole discussion that has gone around this,
Might I respectfully request that you just vote on it?
I
Vote Yes,
understand.
vote it no.
I understand.
I've got.
Gotta go.
So
Call the
Rick moves the question. So,
Fair enough.
all those in favor?
Could you read it one more time, just so that?
Oh, I didn't even write down the
Oh, you
word.
didn't?
I was,
Okay.
because I
I think
thought
Erica
I was
has
just
the
seeking
version.
clarification.
So-
But-
Hold on.
To recommend to the city of Auburn as well as the Auburn Water District that there be no new development within the watershed beyond development that would have been allowed 60 days,
6 months ago.
was it six,
6
was
months
it
ago,
60 days ago.
60 days.
60 days, I think is what was said.
That's what was said.
60 days ago, which still pushes it beyond that. That there be no development within the watershed beyond what would have been allowable 60 days ago, or within parcels recently removed from the watershed. I believe that's, yes? Did I capture that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, all those in favor? All those opposed? Under Robert's rules, which we haven't actually adopted, a tie vote would fail. The motion would fail.
Under everybody's rules. Robert,
So-
Bill.
Yeah. So,
Motion to adjourn.
second?
Is there room for discussion before we get
On the adjournment?
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think-
Discussion on the adjournment?
I don't believe there's discussion.
Adjourn is not discussed.
So once someone's made the motion.
So I'll remove my motion.
2 weeks
On
today is
Tuesday,
16th.
tonight.
All right,
Okay.
we talked about 2 weeks, today is the 16th
Wait,
of
she
May.
wanted to.
It's a Monday?
She wanted
Go
to
ahead.
say
I wanted to
something.
talk about, yeah, things we haven't talked about, that could be on the next agenda.
Yeah,
Okay,
Like the septic and that.
Yeah, like the septic and these letters from the.
so Rick and
DEP,
Glenn
so-
need to scoot.
Yes.
So, anyway,
Well, go, off you go.
yes, thank you.
His motion to adjourn.
No, he removed his motion.
Okay.
We still do have a motion, we still do have a quorum. I'm okay if we adjourn, however, I think that Dan's motion contained two pieces that were combined within the motion, but could necessarily be understood to be separate. And before anyone makes a motion to adjourn, does anyone want to go back and revisit the idea of recommending that?
I'll make a third motion, given that my first, I mean, I think the first one was made before mine, and I see where you're going. So, my motion having failed, I'm making a new motion that we recommend to Auburn, that there, and Auburn Water District, that there be no new development on the basis of any zoning or ordinance changes made within the last 60 days. And that
For what length of time?
until we can conclude a study within, and discuss the study within within this board. And I'm making that subject to friendly amendments, because it looks like some people have some ideas to add.
But they just voted,
That was the same motion.
did they just vote?
No, I'm trying to exclude the disputed property from the,
I think it represents a substantial change because it is now only dealing with property within the watershed, whereas before, the previous motion also dealt with property outside of the watershed, thereby having a much larger scope.
yeah.
I would
That's
like to
exactly
have
my
a
intent.
substantial-
But did those two gentlemen vote the same?
They did not.
Okay, so, because I just didn't want us, right, if they both voted the same,
No,
I
they
would
didn't.
feel super uncomfortable if, you know, they just boogied and now
They
we're.
did
they
not,
both-
I believe.
No,
did
they
not.
voted differently.
Yes, correct.
You have the votes,
I have 4 in favor, 4 opposed. I do not know who.
right?
I'll
Okay.
have
That's
to
okay,
watch.
as long as you all think they
Oh.
voted.
No, it was.
Yeah, he voted with me, and I think he voted
Yes.
with, yeah.
That makes sense, yeah, actually, yeah, okay, right. Go ahead, carry on.
Is there any way we can get a friendly amendment to that? And I would be in favor of this if the commission would also ask for any permitting data to be given to us, because I still think we, as a solution, should be protecting any potential development with a conservation easement, not perpetual, but until, for someday, if we ever do need filtration, I just see it as a cost to Auburn taxpayers, again, delaying anything that has been proven in study with findings of fact. Anyway, if we could word that friendly amendment, if he would be interested in also getting that permitting information, and us to act as a commission, to go see these people and talk to them, and say, hey, we don't want you
I
to
think
develop.
that broadens the scope of that motion quite a bit. I also think it's worth having a full discussion at a meeting
Yeah.
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 before we do that.
Yeah.
I would like to make a friendly amendment, because I think
Please.
if we ask them to wait until our study is done, which study, what specific thing, we're basically asking them to do this in perpetuity. I can tell you that the planning board acts monthly. Oftentimes, we're required 2 meetings, so we're talking 60 days. So, the most meaningful timeframes on our work, and I'm not sure, but because we're discussing zoning, are 60 and 90 days, because 90 days exceeds the normal two
In
meeting
which case I
process.
propose 90 days
Okay.
is the time.
I think we are much more likely to receive it.
I think we could say 60, but I don't want to be asking for an
No.
extension.
I think, I just threw those two numbers out, but
And this was in the past 60 days, is what is in your friendly, is that what you?
no, so it's.
I just,
Basically excluding the gender and property from my project.
That no new development beyond the scope of what would have been allowed 60 days ago, no sooner than 60 days ago, be allowed within the next 90 days.
within the next 90 days. Okay, I didn't hear that.
So there's a motion, is there a second? Second. Discussion.
Who seconded? I thought so,
Yeah.
okay.
Seeing no discussion, I'll take a vote by show of hands. All those in favor? All those opposed? One in opposition, any in abstention? None be it. I think it's a reasonable ask to say, can you not stop all development, but can you continue development as usual until we can determine?
Those are mine, and we have some ability to enforce.
So does that apply to,
We're not
that
gonna say
applies to
nothing to them,
anything?
but
So
you-
if they
you're
went ahead with septic in this period of time, it would apply?
We asked Auburn, that would apply only within Auburn,
Right,
and yes, it would apply to septic because that has not been passed yet.
right.
We also asked AWD, so if AWD were to do it, we asked for the watershed, so that extended into the towns of Turner, Minot, Buckfield, Hebron. Essentially saying, for the next 90 days, please don't allow development outside of the scope of what's already going on. So we're not saying no development. Okay. Any other? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
You know what?
Yes.
One thing. I just want to go, since we're in public meeting, I want to just be on the record, since our folks in the audience aren't here anymore, that during our previous public session, to the extent that I was saying that LawPAC can adopt ordinances, bylaws, et cetera, I would retract that based on some additional review, particularly in AWD's charter. AWD exclusively reserved that authority to itself. I was reading the interlocal agreement more liberally, and I won't bore you with the details of my more liberal interpretation, but I think that we would get fierce resistance if we took the position that LawPAC can adopt ordinances on its own, and so that's just something I think we need to take off the table. So that's just one more fight we don't want to fight. So I would say LawPAC has authority to take legal action to try to, or you have the authority to make recommendations to AWD and to stand in AWD's shoes, and authority to take legal actions to work toward the protection of the water. But to the extent that we would want AWD to adopt a different ordinance or bylaw, that would be just, that we could recommend that to them, but we can't adopt our own.
Excellent.
And again, I mean, there's room to fight, but let's not fight about something as, we've got enough to sort out, we're gonna just take that off the table, and not split hairs with between lawyers.
2 weeks from today is May 16th, is that correct? Does that work for you guys? If we're gonna do that special meeting that Dan had suggested, which is the 16th?
What would
Well,
be on the agenda?
I think that I wouldn't want to have a meeting unless we have agenda items.
Well, I mean,
If there, so let me
Sure,
put this
you-
out here. Rick and I still have concurrent authority to call a special meeting if keep in mind that this was really last minute. I would love to like
Yeah.
be able to give like a week, 2 weeks leeway.
If we picked a date, we can always cancel the meeting if there's no agenda items. And that way there, we can be responsible to this watershed as we need to be. I mean, that's just my take on that.
There's actually no mechanism because we have no bylaws on who's allowed to call meetings. So we have regular meetings, and at this point, Rick and I have been authorized to call special meetings. So I will talk to Rick, and in the meantime, if there's anything that people would like put on an agenda for a meeting in 2 or 2.5 weeks, send it, but please send it to both Rick and I.
Yeah.
I'm finding, because I sort of ran that first meeting that people are emailing me, just me, and I'm like, I don't want to be solely responsible for anything. I want both of the folks that are responsible.
Right, and
for
I would
it.
just say, but as you know, before having a meeting here, it needs to be confirmed that we
Yes,
can have
correct.
it here and until what time.
Yep.
Because if I can't be here for the full time, then
Yep.
we can't have it up.
I mean, one of the things is to approach property owners that have buildable lots and to work something out
Yeah.
in some sort of conservation easement.
So-
If we just picked up 50, 60 acres in the next year, that's huge.
Yeah, so I would say, send that.
Yes.
And, so, is there, before we discuss anything else, is there anything you would like to say?
Well, I was
before
just
we
gonna ask with respect to the letter that I draft, you want me to just send a draft to, how do you want to review and approve of that? Right, I mean, you should at least all read my letter and make sure it,
That gets tricky, because then we're gonna run into, public meeting
I know, if you
law,
start-
unless there's something that we find to be factually incorrect that you.
well, and that's what I would just want is, I mean, essentially.
So I guess essentially I would say that would be like a clerical, not
Yeah.
a substantive. So I think I would say.
Trust
send-
Evan and Rick to review it.
Or,
Trust them.
or you could send it to Rick and I, or send it to all members of the board, but,
It would just be, and essentially what I'm gonna do is take that motion and.
Or is it appropriate to say he could review it? Or, I mean, I don't know.
I mean,
I'm just trying to think, like, who do we want
Right.
authority
Well, I
for
think-
somebody to review it?
I think since everyone voted on it, if it's going to be a review process, we probably ought to let everyone review it. But I think if the letter is sent out and it just says, if you just put at the top, like, you must reply sender, and I'm sending this for the board to read to ensure that it is accurate with regard to the motion that was made and accepted by the board.
And if there was a big issue and somebody didn't agree, then we'd all have to have
Right,
a
then we,
meeting to say.
Right, but I mean, we've
Yeah.
already voted on that motion, and so I'm just gonna,
yeah, no,
Right.
like,
No,
that-
as
yeah,
long
no,
as it
Amanda's gonna,
yeah.
Amanda's gonna take the motion and write it up, and then
Right.
it's, unless Amanda does something egregiously wrong. Like, okay, so, motion to adjourn. Anybody?
So moved.
Second. I'll give it to Dan, all those in favor. I apologize for the length of this meeting, I anticipated this being easily an hour and a half short.
I